You only have so many words in a sales call. You only have so many words to say. There's a certain number, right? And then your words, they don't mean as much after a certain amount. So it's like, save your questions, save your words, save your stuff for when it's really meaningful.
Welcome to the Waste No Day podcast, a podcast specifically for and about the home services industry as it relates to plumbing, heating, air conditioning, and electrical. More than a podcast, Waste No Day is a credo, a determination, a mindset. It is a never-ending discipline. It is a refuse to lose pursuit. It is a wake-up call every morning to waste no day. Now here's your hosts, Brian Burton and Nate Minnick.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Waste No Day podcast. Your hosts, Nate and Brian, hanging out with you again and looking forward to a great show. Adam Holbein is joining us today from Eco Plumbers, Electricians, and HVAC Technicians in Ohio, one of your favorite stomping grounds, Brian. And we'll be looking forward to talking with him about our favorite subject here, sales. And he has a unique background. Now, having been on both the plumbing and the HVAC side of things, we're going to have a great conversation with him about what has made him successful, not just in one trade, Brian, but in two, which is really an incredible accomplishment. Looking forward to the conversation with him. It's going to be a great show, as it always is. But of course, first thing we're going to do here is spend a little bit of time talking to you ourselves. Brian, let's start it off with a quote.
It is when they liquefy gold in the fire that the impurities come out. John Bevere.
Ooh, cream rises to the top. All right, let's go.
A little more. Well, yeah, that's probably pretty painful too, but this would be a little more of iron sharpening iron, pain, and, the pressure the diamond goes through, because it's saying that you've got dirty, kind of worth less, not worthless, but worth a lot less than it should be version of gold until it's heated in that fire. And then the impurities start to rise up and get scraped off. And I've got a background and a childhood that was not always as fun and happy as it could be. And Adam, our guest today, I know from his boss, Aaron Gaynor, has a similar background, and maybe he'll get into that, hopefully, a little bit. It's always nice to hear when someone comes up to his level that they've come from pretty far down a good triumph story. And then I was talking to a couple of our team here in Phoenix this morning, and one of them who had gone through some refining process and one who is probably going through some right now. And I'm just, you and I have been in leadership we pretty much both got in at the same time and together, right? Maybe a few months apart and at the same place. And it's funny now to look back down the road. Like, I'll be talking to a 22-year-old technician, and I'm like, and he might be going through something that just for him feels like it's either the end of the world or it's something that's going to take 10,000 years to get through. Right. And the amount of time that we've spent in leadership, and then everything we went through ourselves before we even got there, like, I look at what he's going through and I go, like, you're just going to wake up tomorrow morning and this is over. Like, you can just see it. Like, we've been through enough and we're old enough that we know how short the timeline is on most of the things that back 20 years ago felt like the end of the world. And it's just a cool reminder. John Bevere, actually, I don't know that this quote was in that book, but he wrote a book called The Bait of Satan. I don't know if we've talked about him on the show before, but this was a really good book on entitlement and just kind of tripping over the bait to be miserable. And I had Logan and Jamie read this book at one point, and it just blew their minds. Really, Logan's told me many times changes his life, because we all get into these patterns where we're just looking around, finding the reason to be miserable. Like, whatever my circumstance is right here, right now, no matter what I'm doing, no matter where I'm at in life, I can look to the left and find a reason to be upset, or I can look to the right and find a reason to be grateful. There has never been a time in my life, no matter what I've gone through, that I could look. It wasn't very hard to look around and either find a reason to be upset or a reason to be grateful. There's never been a point in time where both of them weren't in my life. And the choice to be made is, which one is going to serve me more? To find the reasons to be upset or to find the reasons to be grateful and move forward. Regardless, it's just the choice is to move forward or not, right? It's just to power through. But I think if we can spend more time looking at our troubles as that refinement, that burning fire that's pushing the impurities out of the gold. I hate to be trite, with kind of cliche things, but this was kind of the conversation I was having this morning. It's like, I'm looking at even February 2025 here was a rough month for us. We had beat our biggest month ever in January by 20 something %. And then we missed budget in February. Like, man, I mean, missing budget in February, it's not the first time that's ever happened.
Oh, yeah.
But on a January where you beat budget by 20% and it's beating your biggest month ever by over 20%. And with no new trucks, no new techs, like, you're just like, ugh. And then all of February, it was difficult to look at to see the bright side of everything. It was just grueling, man. We couldn't get enough calls on the board. We couldn't close at a high enough rate to catch up. We couldn't bring our ticket average up high enough to make up the difference, the deficit that we had built in the beginning of the month. And it was just, you've been there. You might have even been there in February. I don't know. But we've been through this together many times. And it's funny as I'm looking around and I'm seeing, shout out to our boy, Jonathan Wisman and Who Hire, because I'm looking at the squad that we have. And even though this was my Monday morning meeting, the first Monday after February ended, thank God it did end after all. And I said, I'm a lot of newer faces on there that we've acquired recently. And it just, as I look around, I'm like, we're not doing a kick me exercise. We're not going to ruin the first week of March by how bad February sucked. But I just wanted to say that of all the years that Nate and I were on an amazing leadership team with an amazing team of salespeople, techs, CSRs, dispatchers, and admin people who blew budgets to pieces. I mean, we just blew goals, like stretch goals got annihilated. We've never had a year where we hit budget 12 months. It's never happened.
Yep.
And we've had some years where we tanked so hard in a month or two that we were like, oh, we'll never catch up. And then there were some of the biggest years we ever had. And it's like, man, all it takes is a few bad days at the end or beginning of a month that you don't catch up with. And it's fine. And at the end of the day, as I was looking around at these team and these friends that work with us, I was just like, February's over. Like, regardless, I get to work with this crew right now. And these are some awesome people to work with. And then the whole rest of the month now, that's just how I've been feeling. Like, it's been, I don't look at things and go like, oh, this is just the fire that's pushing the impurities out. So, but I like to use analogies like that, as you know. But what I do look at it is just like, I have the opportunity to go one way or the other here. And I'm going to choose to be grateful. I'm going to choose to see the things that are here that I want to be here, and look at the things that are here that I don't want as steps to get me to where I want to be.
Well said, Brian. And this episode, just like many of the other ones that we've produced over the years, is another way for you to push out the impurities in your performance in the home or many other areas that we talk about. But this one specifically is going to help you become better in home services, particular place and industry, as well as even some of the refining points of how to deal with a client. Well, let's hear about somebody who's appreciated the episodes over the years, Brian, and somebody who's taken the time to share that with us. Who are we highlighting today?
An absolute gem. 5 stars. Just a gem of a podcast. I own a zero-res carpet cleaning franchise in Orlando, Florida, and have shared this podcast with my team. All the principles apply no matter the service industry. In the field, I have learned to never guarantee the results of anything, but I do guarantee my team that they will make more money when they listen to an episode and share with me what they will apply in their job. There may be a $5 bill incentive every time they do that, more than pays for itself.
Huh. Like that.
Thank you, Brian and Nate, for being awesomely altruistic and sharing not just your opinions and experience, but your real, down-to-earth personalities on the show. I almost look forward to long drive times and terrible traffic because I can listen longer. Thanks.
Oh, my word.
Tanner. Oh, he signed it. Tanner. Nice. Dude, for everybody who leaves a review, by all means, sign it. Put your name. I don't care if you put your first name, last name. You want to tell somebody happy birthday. You want to shout out your kids. Like, this thing's, whatever episode it gets read on, it ain't going anywhere. Like, that thing will be there forever. Like 20 years from now, you can play it for your daughter that you told her happy birthday in a review. That's getting read. So do whatever you want. And if you want to slip in something to make fun of your buddy and we don't catch it, slip it in there. I don't care. But either way, Tanner, we appreciate you taking quite a bit of time to write that awesome review. That means a lot to us. It's we were actually talking to today's guest recently about this, which is in the tougher times in the evening when it's not easy to part with the family, and for me come upstairs, for Nate to go downstairs at his house and get on a video call with each other from a couple thousand miles away, and the guest. It is the reviews. The reviews are the number one thing that I just say to myself, I'm like, I don't want to do this tonight. You know, I want to hang, or I have so much work to do. I'm like overwhelmed. I don't want to go up there and shut out. And I think about the reviews. I don't know if this is the case for Nate, although I think you've told me it is a few times, but I just think about reading one of those reviews, and that person who took the time to write one of those reviews is like in the dumps right now, or when this episode that we're going to record tonight airs. And I'm like, I think of the times that I was in my truck and it was just the worst day ever. And I would have something just like an audiobook of a sales trainer or whatever. And that was enough. I always used to think, I wish somebody would make audio tapes like that did what we do, you know? So now we have that, and I get to actually be one of the voices on it. So I just get charged up, and I skip steps on the way upstairs because I think about the reviews and the fact that we could impact somebody like that who just happens to be having a crummy day in between calls or whatever. So the reviews mean the world to us. And just like getting read on the show, these reviews are something that I'll have until the day I die, something I'll be very proud of. And the more, the merrier.
That's a great point, Brian. And we appreciate that, Tanner. Still not quite sure why you think Brian has a down-to-earth personality, but, hey, the rest of it was well written and well thought out. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. Well, I tell you who does have a great personality, and it's somebody that we're excited to talk about and talk to today, Mr. Adam Holbein. It's time for us to put him in your passenger seat. Our guest today is Adam Holbein. He is the highest grossing salesman at Eco Plumbers, Electricians, and HVAC Technicians, which is Ohio's leading comprehensive home services company. Since joining the company in 2013 as a plumbing installer, Adam's career has been a journey of exceptional growth. He transitioned from plumbing technician to pioneer of the plumbing sales team, where he quickly became the top performer. After 5 successful years in plumbing sales, Adam expanded his expertise into the HVAC division, where he swiftly became its highest producing sales member. Known for his straightforward sales tactics, Adam excels at overcoming objections before they even arise. With an average sale of $19,000 and a 60% conversion rate, his ability to drive results has made him one of the fastest growing sales professionals in both the company as well as the industry as a whole. We're looking forward to this one. Welcome here, Adam.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on, buddy. Adam graced us with his presence on Wiser Wednesday a couple weeks ago, and he actually did it when I was on a plane, so I couldn't even be there to watch it. But Adam is part of Aaron Gaynor's team in Ohio, Eco Plumbing, HVAC and Electrical, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think you're supposed to say the entire name because it's like a Dr. Seuss thing.
Yeah. Nate with the Dr. Seuss references. Thanks, buddy. Glad you could bring some wisdom on the show. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. All right. I did it wrong. But being on Gainer's team, and Gainer's a friend of mine, and he said, just let Adam run, man. He'll kill this thing. So I had not met Adam. We had a couple conversations, but I'm like, all right, here we go. I think this was the first Wiser Wednesday that I was not part of. And then I got the feedback from the team when we landed, and everybody said it was awesome. So just like that, got the invite to come on to Waste No Day.
Wow. Survived the proving ground to make it to the big leagues. Impressive, Adam.
The bigger league, which is to say quadruple A minor league farm for a farm for a farm team.
You've gone from like 5 to 6 listeners to now dozens and dozens of listeners on this show.
You're not going to know what to do with all the texts and emails you get after this.
Absolutely blow up your inbox. Well, we're glad to have you on, Adam, and we're super excited to talk to you. You do have a unique story because you are one of the few people that I know that have transitioned from one trade to another, specifically moving from plumbing to HVAC, which is really cool. We want to hear about that. But first, let's start off with your story, man. Like, how did you come up through the trades? Was it a family thing? Did you get invited in somehow? Tell us a little bit about how you got introduced and your history through it.
Yeah, so my father is a new construction plumber. So that's kind of what got me into the trades. My grandfather also did some plumbing. And so it was really just more of a family thing that kind of got me involved. And, really, I never thought I wanted to be a plumber. So it wasn't like I dreamed of necessarily being a plumber. But as time went on, I realized that my father was a single parent. So a lot of times, I was going with him to job sites and things of that nature. And at a very young age, I was learning plumbing. And when I got out of high school, I naturally just got into plumbing as kind of a temporary thing in a way. And I loved it. I love plumbing, and, my mom wasn't around, she was kind of in and out of prison. So we had like kind of a little bit of a rough upbringing in a sense. And, I found in the trades and plumbing and things of that, there's a lot there that a lot of people can relate to, and you can do a lot of growing in the trades. And I just kept working at it and working in plumbing. I was an installer for many years. That's when I started with Aaron about sometime around 2013. I was just a plumbing installer for him, doing the installs basically for work that he was selling. And I actually left Aaron for maybe a year or two. We kind of butted heads a little bit. I was young and dumb and, thought I could get another dollar here and, that game. So, I came back, realized the grass wasn't greener on the other side, and, really just got to work. And I started to realize that you can have really honest, upfront conversations with people, and they want to buy stuff. They want to fix their homes up. They want to improve things. You don't always have to sell them. You don't always have to convince them, so to speak. And I started realizing that I had a way of communicating with homeowners that really made the transition of the entire project very easy. So I ended up getting into sales about 8 years ago, and plumbing sales was wonderful. I went through there. I did a lot of plumbing sales for about 5 or 6 years, mostly indoor plumbing sales. That was a lot of fun. Water heaters, tankless, sump pumps, drainage, different things of that nature. And then over the last couple of years, I really wanted to transition into HVAC. That was something that really piqued my interest of just kind of moving over to that side of the industry as well, to where, you're in a basement, like you're there with the water heater, you're right beside the furnace. It's kind of the same stuff, it's just a little different. So I wanted to learn that side of the industry. So did a lot of training, a lot of learning, and kind of dived into HVAC, and I've been doing that for the last 2 years now for HVAC sales.
Excellent. So you grew up, as many people in the trades do, riding shotgun with dad, and that's really cool. How many times did you get yelled at to go bring the right tool in, type of thing?
Yeah, that was all the time. My dad was very, he's been a new construction plumber at that point for probably 35 years. And, he's very OCD about his plumbing. He wanted the letters all go in one direction. It doesn't matter that it's going to be covered up with drywall,
No.
it's like, I can't tell you how many times I would put in water lines and the guy would make me rip them out, and redo them because they was crooked. And I was like, nobody's going to see this. And he really is the one that started at an early age of like, they are going to see this. Somebody's going to see this, and they're going to have the opportunity to talk good or bad about that. Never give them the opportunity to talk bad about your work.
Yeah, that's such a great, taking pride in your work type of perspective that I'm sure you still carry with you today. Even though you may not still be putting the water lines in yourself, you still have that mentality and the paradigm that comes with it. Has that impacted in your conversation with homeowners? Like, are you OCD yourself in terms of like systems and sales and processes, or do you take a different approach?
Yeah, I would say I'm very particular. I make sure that the homeowner realizes that like I do care about what it looks like and how it performs and how long it lasts. And there's a lot of ways of doing stuff, but there's typically only a couple right ways, So just taking pride in that and really believing that your crew, your company that backs you is going to do a better job than the next company. And that, leads right into sales itself is, just believing in your crew that they are truly going to do a better job than anybody else. At the end of the day, especially with HVAC, like it's just a whole bunch of boxes, but it's like, who's going to put those boxes in for you?
Well, appreciate you starting us off with your story there, Adam. It's always interesting to learn where people have come from and how their history has shaped their future, if you will. And you certainly have an interesting story with, obviously the family situation going on in there, but also the crossover in the trades. So, when you think, and I just want to ask you this up front, when you think of the difference between your in-home presentation on the plumbing side of things to now your in-home presentation on the HVAC side of things, has anything changed for you of great significance, or is it pretty much the same thing with just different parts and materials?
It's exactly the same thing. My process has not changed. I thought it would need to. A lot of people I thought when I transitioned over that it's a lot different. There's a lot more processes and different things you'll have to do. But what I realized is that the same process I used in plumbing, which is just very straightforward, but it works in HVAC. It's people. You're dealing with people. The product itself doesn't actually matter, is what I learned. For a long time, I thought I became good at plumbing sales because of my knowledge of plumbing. And I quickly started realizing that it wasn't my knowledge of plumbing, because I wasn't extremely knowledgeable at the beginning in HVAC, and it just kind of took right off. And it was just doing and following the same processes that I do in plumbing.
That's so interesting. And I mean, I don't know if you're aware or not, but the listening base of Waste No Day has certainly increased over the years. But with the increase in listeners has actually come the diversification of all different types of trades. Like it's no longer just, HVAC techs and plumbers and electricians. There's asphalt guys and there's, roofers and window guys and like all these different, generally in-home services, but many different variables to it. And I think the one commonality that the show continues to bring forth is the fact that sales is sales is sales is sales, right? It's about the human connection. It's about the human relationship. It's about your presentation skills. The XYZ widgets and everything else that are coming along at the facilitation part of things. Yeah, that can be whatever, man. But there is so much commonality to how a plumber presents to an HVAC tech, to a roofer, to an asphalt, or at least there could be and probably should be in terms of great sales. And that's why I think a lot of the popularity of the show continues to grow, because we continue to dive into this element of the very, very critical portion of in-home sales and the presentation piece. And so your story is unique because you can actually experientially talk about it from the angle to say, like, I've been on both sides of that equation. I've sold completely different things, from pumps to heat pumps, like, very different things, right? And it's the same, because you're still dealing with Mr. and Mrs. homeowner, and you still have to explain to them, what this is going to impact in their life and their family, and all these things are still common, right?
Yeah.
The stuff in between is actually what often gets in the way, because you think that you have to know, you have to have a doctorate in HVAC, or you have to have a master's in plumbing, to be able to communicate this stuff. Hey, that may help you, or it may actually hinder you depending on how you utilize that knowledge. But you found this to be true experientially, in that it's really about your ability to communicate. So let's start there. From Adam's perspective, in all of your diverse sales experience, when you think of the key components of what has made you successful, and you are successful, in fact, you're incredibly successful. You mentioned while we were off air before we got started that you had been consistently producing upwards in the upper 3 millions in a plumbing truck before making the switch over to HVAC, which is astounding. Not even doing excavation, which is just mind-boggling. So clearly you have dialed in your process and you know what you're talking about. So when you think of communication and the things that have made you successful in all of this experience on both sides of the equation in plumbing and HVAC, what are the foundational points that you believe have gotten you there?
Yeah. So, years ago, I went to a Nexstar class, and Keith was one of the trainers there, and he was talking about a balloon. How a consumer has a balloon basically that, when they realize they have a problem, they start having all of these concerns in their head that start popping up. Who's going to take care of this? When can they get here? How long is it going to take? How much does it cost? And all this balloon just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I learned that, the first step is like deflating that balloon, because that balloon is really important and it's going to keep that person from actually opening up to you. So really deflating that balloon at the beginning and handling any major concerns that they may have.
Hey, Adam, before we move on, what does that look like?
So a lot of people are real quick when they get to the front door, let's hurry up and set our agenda. Let's take control of this situation as a technician or as a salesperson. And I've learned that, you're going to someone's home, okay, and you're entering their space. A lot of times, if you just are a little more submissive and don't talk so much at the very beginning and really allow the homeowner to take control of the conversation after you introduce yourself, they're going to feel that they need to tell you stuff. They're going to feel that you just came in their home, you introduced each other, and they're going to have a lot of information on their mind, and it's different information. So a lot of times homeowners will start, telling you their problem or wanting to take you to the problem, and you start realizing what's important to them, rather it's the issue or timing. And you make sure you really want to make sure, like, if they seem frantic about the water leaking in their basement, that you address that immediately. We're not setting an agenda and telling you how great our company is right at the beginning before we actually kind of like get to some of the big problems that's going on in your head. So a lot of times I'll introduce myself, is my truck parked okay? And then it's, fill me in. What's going on? I have all of this information. I have all of this stuff on this iPad that it's telling me, but please fill me in on exactly what's going on, and allow them to really open up to you and tell you what's going on. And when they stop talking, just wait a second, because there's more. There's something else that they're going to say, something else that's on their mind, and they're going to give you a lot of information in those moments. And it's kind of fun because, like, when they stop talking, and they can, as long as you don't respond right away, they'll say more and they'll tell you more information. And a lot of times that information that they give you are those balloon problems, it's those concerns. So then you can, I say, kind of like put it in your pocket. You put all those little concerns in your pocket. We're going to deal with that. We're going to accept, bypass, kind of move on. And you put all those concerns in your pocket. But you have to remember that you have to clear all of those objections and all of those concerns as you go through the next, 20 minutes. So it's just allowing them to open up at the front door. I used to set my agenda very strictly at the front door. This is exactly what we're going to do. And I realized that I kind of took control of the call at that moment, and that homeowners wasn't so willing to tell me stuff. I had to ask more. And that's a lot more of an uphill climb, is when you have to like kind of pry stuff out of people instead of like, hey, I'm here. Like, what's up? What do you need from me? And just in a very easy way, to where it's not, it's not coming off so strong. I feel a lot of salespeople, when they first walk in the door, it's, telling you how great your house is and, making these connections that are completely fake. And it's like, it doesn't do I've never told anybody their house looks great when I walk in the door, like that's not how we make connections. The way we're going to make a connection is I'm going to solve their problem. I'm here to like take care of their issue. We can build connections and relationships as the conversation goes on and the process goes on, but I'm there to solve this problem. And at the beginning, that's what's important. So, really allowing them to tell you that information, deflating that balloon a little bit. And then that's when you can start kind of taking control of the call, setting an agenda, and kind of flipping that hand and kind of handing it over to me, so to speak, to kind of take on that next role.
That's an interesting approach, Adam, and I appreciate you sharing that. A couple questions, because this is a bit of a unique way of entering the call, and it sounds like it's been very successful for you. Have you found it to be difficult to gain some of that information if you're dealing with more of, say, an introvert or somebody who is, just not necessarily interested in disclosing lots of personal information, or just isn't really into small talk, and they're kind of more like, hey, yeah, the stuff's downstairs, just tell me what you need, and I'll be over here. Like, how have you been able to successfully get a person like that to open up organically without having to ask a lot of kind of inquisition questions, if you will?
Yeah, I think part of it's just being like, just being really genuine and, hey, fill me in. What exactly is going on? I'm here to help you, but I can read all of this information, but I'd rather hear it right from you of exactly what's going on. And I think being submissive in that moment is really important. And you'll hear I really talk about that, because it's something that I changed years ago that made a massive difference in getting people to open up in those moments. Different personality types definitely can come off that way. But if I'm, just questioning to try to help, and it's truly coming from that space, a lot of times people will open up, and, they'll tell you what they need to tell you to kind of get you going, to get you started. And, there's definitely people that are, more introverted and kind of closed off and stuff. And that's where it's really problem based. What's going on today? We're not talking about personal stuff. And, a lot of times these people aren't opening up in that moment in a personal way, but it's more of really what their problems are, and then asking little questions to keep them going, keep that conversation going there at the door. Because, like, for instance, you get someone there, like, they call you, and they might have already had 2 or 3 companies there that diagnosed the same problem, and they they won't tell you that all the time. But you start, kind of asking little open-ended questions and stuff as they respond. And, how did you find out that, people mention like a certain word, like a blower motor or a computer board or something, and it's like, well, where'd you come up with that? Like, where'd that come from? Like, did we guess? You're just being honest, like, hey man, just tell me the truth so I can help you out here. And a lot of times just people will open up in a sense before you take all of the control of the call, I've found.
Right. So that kind of reminds me of Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. We've had him on here actually twice. And he talks about the idea of using the last 2 to 3 words that somebody has spoken and just repeating it back to them, but using the inflection in your voice to kind of go up. And it's an inferred question, right? So you might say something like, yeah, I don't know, I'm just kind of worried about like the blower motor. It might be going out. And you say, it might be going out? Right. And like they think they've put a period at the end of that sentence and they're ready for you to talk. And you do. And all you do is repeat back the last several words with a little bit of an inflection, and the tone goes up and the question mark is there. And then they just go right back into it again. Is that kind of what you're talking about when you're doing this? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's mastered.
Yeah. Keeping that going, because it'll, it becomes fun. You're just keeping that going, and there's a lot of curiosity. That's why I talk about the submissive side. You don't want to be in control in that situation. You want them to be in all the control, and you're just really kind of just keeping that going and allowing them to keep telling you the information. There's so many times where they'll stop and you just give them a second, and it's amazing how many times they'll, even keep going again and telling you something else. And it's just interesting, but you just got to be confident to not be so jumpy right there at the front door. You'll get to the questions you want to ask. You'll get to the equipment. You'll get to all the stuff. But I feel that when you're more quiet at the front door right away, other than introducing yourself, obviously introducing yourself, asking the few little questions, but I do feel that they feel they need to speak to you and need to tell you what's going on because you're being so quiet right at the very beginning and you're entering their home. There is something I feel that happens there where they feel the need to tell you something. Rather, that's information that's, whatever that information is. They feel that somebody needs to talk. And a lot of times, if you just don't talk, they will.
Exactly. And when you think about the other side of the equation here, Adam, and maybe even in your own experience when you were younger and up and coming, what do you think it is about in-home tradespeople that they're generally uncomfortable with silence, or that they're not, shall we say, interested in having this type of a soft approach, like let's actually just have a conversation, let's ask some questions, let's get to know the thing, slow it down a little bit? What do you think it is that keeps people in a rush, or they don't, I don't want to say enjoy, but they find maybe this a little bit awkward or a little bit outside of what they think they're supposed to be doing, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I don't know exactly, like, I want to say I know why, but as a technician, you're trained that you're the professional a lot. As a salesperson, as a tech, you're the professional. You have to run the call. You hear that in a lot of trainings, a lot of processes, and And I'm a big person on processes, but a tech and a salesperson's always trained that they're going to kind of run the show. And I believe that as soon as a homeowner stops talking, it's fun when you do like ride alongs, like when someone's even riding along with me or I'm riding along with them. And you'll see like a customer will stop talking and then like the person that's with me, they're so quick to say something, because they think that I'm waiting on them to talk, and I actually have to tell them, people that ride with me and stuff, like, hey, if there's awkward side, like just don't ever say anything, actually. Like,
Right.
and it's funny because it even gets so quiet sometimes that they believe they need to say something, and they'll kind of like speak up a little bit to say something. And it's interesting, but they come with, it's hard to do that. It's hard to not say something because you feel that you need to, but you build a confidence once you realize how many times, if you just wait and don't respond so quickly, how often there's more to be said. And then you build this confidence. And I can't say I know why people don't do it, but I feel that they feel that they need to speak, and they haven't built the confidence to realize that they'll have their time to speak. And I like to feel you only have so many words in a sales call. You only have so many words to say. There's a certain number, right? And then your words, they don't mean as much after a certain amount. So it's like, save your questions, save your words, save your stuff for when it's really meaningful. Right now, it's about gathering information and learning, and then we can use that stuff later in this call.
Don't spill your candy in the lobby, as David Sandler used to say in Sandler Training.
Yeah.
I love that perspective, Adam. And the thought occurred to me that as awkward as it is for you as the technician or the plumber to be standing there in silence, the homeowner is also experiencing a level of awkwardness standing there in silence too. And if you maintained your silence just a half second longer than they do, which probably isn't really that hard when you think about it, they will fill that gap, and they'll fill it with information that could be beneficial to the relationship and the rest of the call.
Yeah, and it kind of happened by accident a few times, and then I started realizing, like, man, it's not like these people, like, nobody ever got upset for me being quiet for a second at the beginning. Like, I'll make up
You hear
for
that,
it.
Brian?
Like, they're never going to bring up that awkward moment. They never have. It's never come up. Like,
As David J.P. Phillips, who was on here a few weeks ago, said, "There's power in the pause."
For
So
sure.
good.
For sure.
Well, this is a great start, Adam, and certainly it's proven to be successful in terms of one of the foundations you've built upon to help your sales career. As you reflect upon some of the other successes that you've had, whether it's been in plumbing or in HVAC, What's another area that you focused on or a strong suit that you've built your successes upon to really push you into that next level?
So, obviously that introduction and gathering that information is it's just the very beginning. And then we have to put that information to work. We have to actually use that information that we gather. And I'm looking for a lot. I'm reading a lot. I'm trying to figure out all the different things that I want to know for when I go to build my bridge. And you'll hear me talk a lot about building bridges. And it's basically just a simple term. You guys have probably heard of it a lot, but it's, that homeowners, they have a problem with their furnace or a problem with their water heater. At that point, it's, how do I get this fixed? They're not thinking, oh, I need a new one necessarily. They might think in their head it's old, or, I knew this was going to happen, but it's like, how do I get this fixed? What's wrong with it at the beginning, or it's not working. And a lot of times we go in and we're so quick to try to convince someone as to why they need a new thing, and that's, we feel as a salesperson or a technician, like we're trying to convince them that they need a new item. And really, when you're building bridges, I feel like that's where we go wrong a lot of times, is that we try to convince that person that they need a new item before you've built the bridge and walk them across that bridge. You're talking about a new item or, replacement or this or that. And we really haven't done all of the work to build the bridge of, the repair, and can we repair this? And does it make sense to repair this? And I really go down a repair first path. And it is, hey, we're here to get this fixed. I've had people, you show up to the front door and you're there for a water heater estimate, for a new water heater. And I used to love the front door, be like, hey, I'm here to fix your water heater. Sounds like you're having some issues with it. Like, they're so quick to correct you. Well, I don't want it fixed. I want a new one. Oh, all right. Well, and that's so powerful. And people don't realize, whenever you can get a consumer to start bringing things up on their own, by building bridges and planting seeds, it makes the conversation totally different. You're no longer trying to convince them to do something, like they are bringing it up. And that's really the kind of key to my success, in my opinion, is that I'm not trying to convince people to replace these things. It's more of, I'm building bridges, I'm planting seeds, I'm trying to get you to allow me to repair this item. If you would like to repair it, let's repair it. That's 100% perfectly fine. And zero talk about replacing, zero talk. I won't bring it up. It's a rule of mine. I'm not allowed to bring up replacing of any item, water heater, tankless, furnace, doesn't matter. I want that consumer to bring that idea to the table. So my job is, how do I build the bridge? How do I provide the repair options? How do I provide everything that is going to educate them enough to where they're going to ask the most important question? And that is, how much does a new one cost?
Love that.
And that's the goal. That's what you're trying to get to. It's not, for me, it's not if a consumer says yes or no to me at the end of the day. It's, did they ask me the question? That question. That is the most important question. Plumbing, HVAC, it doesn't matter. That's where you're trying to get. So the whole goal is to build a bridge, plant seeds, try to repair, want to repair. And a lot of times consumers are smart enough, and if you educate them and you plant the right seeds, they will ask that question, and they'll do it about 80% of the time, and you're going to sell probably 60% of them. And it just becomes a math equation, and becomes fun. Tankless. I made a rule to myself. I wasn't allowed to say the word tankless before a consumer. So we'll talk about a lot of stuff, but I'm not bringing up a tankless water heater. That consumer, Eco is real big into tankless and trying to really push that into the market. And it's just part of our name. It was our whole thing at the beginning. We advertise the heck out of it. We push it into the market. They have heard about it, a lot of times customers say, oh, you're probably going to try to sell me one of the tankless water heaters, and it's I do the opposite. I want them to bring it up. So I won't bring that stuff up. And a lot of times you can plant seeds and build bridges to get people to bring up the stuff and bring up the questions of replacement. And anytime you can do that, you start clearing objections. I talk a lot about clearing objections before they come up. And, we all know the objections, and that's the other kind of side to my success, in my opinion. But the first thing is really building those bridges, planting the seeds. And a lot of consumers, once they're educated with an old system, they're going to start asking you about a new one.
Now, when you say planting the seeds, Adam, is this the entire duration of the call? Is this when you're sitting at the table? When you're building this bridge, is this a 15-minute process, or is this a 2-hour process? What does that look like for you?
So it's throughout the entire process for sure. You're planting seeds, you're working on building that bridge, you're checking in with the homeowner to see where they're at on that bridge throughout. Have they realized that the best thing is to replace this yet? That's the end of the bridge. If it's an old system, of course, like, it don't need to be replaced, and it don't need to be replaced. But if it's a 25-year-old furnace and we're looking at a $2,000 repair, does it make sense? No, it really don't. A lot of times it actually don't make sense to repair that furnace. And it's building that bridge and getting them to realize that and come to that conclusion on their own. And a lot of times they'll ask about those things, because you're getting to a point they realize that it makes the most sense, to replace those items a lot of times.
Well, I'm sure I'd love to do a 2-hour role play with you, the entire duration of a call, but that might be a little lengthy for this episode. So give us some of the phrases, or
we'll do a 2-parter, bro.
Give us some of the phrases, or like the check-in questions, or if you follow the analogy, some of the planks that you would begin placing on that bridge to help me as the consumer, as the homeowner, begin to conceptualize that perhaps fixing isn't the best thing.
Yeah, so let's use a water heater as an example. We'll start there. I do have a belief that at a certain age, a lot of consumers do have in their head that they potentially need a new one. They don't want to say that though. Like it's like they hide it from you. And there's this big relief you'll realize when they finally ask that question or bring it up. Like, there's a kind of a relief in the room from them, and you'll feel it where they're like, they finally tell you, like, yeah, I knew I was going to need a new one at some point. Like, there's this, like, it's like this relief that happens. And it's interesting. I noticed that for a long time. And it's like, why is that? And it really comes down to that they already had that in their mind at some point. They thought about it when they bought the house and they had a 15-year-old water heater. At some point, it was in their mind that, hey, we might need to replace this. So a lot of times, like on a water heater, let's say it's a 12-year-old water heater and it's leaking. Well, every plumber knows that if the tank's leaking, it needs a new one. It doesn't matter how old it is, right? The tank's leaking, it needs a new water tank. Consumer don't know that. Okay, so that's the start of that bridge. Is you have to make sure that person realizes that once this tank ruptures, that it no longer can be repaired. All right, so that's one side of it. But let's say it's like a gas valve or something that's leaking or a problem with it. Right off the bat, like I'd walk into basements and like an old water, be like, oh man. And you just don't say anything, and the tone you use is very important. And once again, that homeowner will feel that they need to say something, and they're going to be like, well, what do you see? Well, why did you make that comment? Why did you make that noise? Or you just be like, oh, wow. And they're like, what? I said, well, it's really old. I'm surprised it's still around. Let's see what we can do about fixing it. And we just, drop it, leave it. Like, that's a seed. You just planted a seed, okay? And a lot of people don't realize it, but in that, you just planted something in that homeowner's brain that what's fun is they'll bring these things back up later in the conversation. And that's how you're getting really good at it, is the seeds you're planting are connecting, and then they'll bring them back up as the reasons they're going to decide to replace this. So, making those comments right after, it's a simple question, but how long do you plan on living in this home? You plan on, how long you own it? I want to know that because I care, but at the same time, it's planting a seed of like, how long do we expect this thing to work? Are we planning on living here for another 20 years? Plan on living here for another 5 years, and there's another connection point there where you're kind of connecting, You want to start connecting their brain to longevity, like how long this thing's supposed to last. It made it way past its life expectancy already. And you're just making statements. You're not trying to convince them with these things. You're just making statements as you're looking at that item. Okay. And, the water heater, if it's something obvious or whatever, we're doing our diagnosing, we're figuring out exactly what's wrong with it, obviously. And we're bringing that stuff to the table of, hey, these are the problems. Let's say it's a bad gas valve and it's $600. And it's like, be upfront with them. Hey, this is what it's going to take to repair this. If that's what you decide to do, and it's really important. Like, if you decide repairing this is the best thing to do, like, here's what it's going to take. And a lot of times you just start piquing this interest, and you'll realize that a lot of times they'll just kind of break in a sense, and then they'll just say something like, I was expecting this. I probably just need a new one. Or what's a new one cost? Or like, it'll get there a lot easier than people realize. It's not so much of convincing there's a problem, so you need to replace. Like, it's more of connecting the dots for them and getting them to open up to that idea.
I like the question that you asked there, Adam, because you said, if you decide to, it's an inferred question. If you decide to repair this, okay, so what is that doing in the homeowner's mind? Right? Well, my system is broken. So, of course, I would like to repair it. But there seems to be a reason that maybe you asked me why I would decide to repair it, but you didn't actually put the other part of the equation in there. And so obviously, as the homeowner, like, I called you out here because I don't want it to be broken anymore. I want it to be fixed. So then you're asking me this question like, well, if you decide to actually repair it or decide to fix it, and you just kind of keep on going. In my mind, what's prompted there is, well, wait a minute, is there a third option here? Is that what you find?
That's the question. Yeah, that's what they always ask. They always say, well, is there another choice?
Right.
And even that's a great question. Like, that's a perfect thing like, that's a gold one. Like, if they ask that, like, it's golden, because that's starting down that path of, them bringing this idea to the table. And people are so quick to go in, and I'm the professional, and yes, you need a new one, and I'm going to convince you as to why you need a new one. And that is such an uphill climb. Like,
it's a fight.
That's why objections come up. That's why people have they're always like, oh, how do you clear objections? I just don't have as many objections as you do. I'm not that much better at clearing objections. I clear objections. I will talk a lot about that, but I clear objections before they come up. I don't allow objections to come up because I know a lot of the objections, and you got to clear them. But yes, getting them to really start bringing up that in their idea, and they'll ask those exact things. Well, what's the other option? And it's like, well, I mean, there's a lot of other options, but if you want to repair it, this is what it's going to take to repair it. Would you like to hear those other options? And then you just start down this path of, asking them to be okay with it, asking for them to be okay with you sitting down with them and talking about a new one.
So Christopher Nolan made an amazing film a number of years ago called Inception. And it's far-fetched and everything else, but it's beautiful because it's about this idea that, if I could make you come up with the idea, and I could actually insert it into your mind somehow. Like, I would enter into your dreams, and we would insert this into your dreams so that when you woke up, you thought it was your idea. That it's far more powerful than if I would try to convince you while you were awake. And in the movie, like, it's very in depth and very well thought out and everything. And they talk about the idea that if the idea that is being planted into the dream or into your subconscious, if you will, is obvious, your subconscious would reject it and say, like, well, this is like ridiculous. This is a sales pitch, or this is not from me. I didn't think of this. But and the reason I'm bringing this up is because, like, I think what you're doing is you're very subtly planting the concept of the idea into their minds so that when they arrive there, it is actually their idea, although you've done all the work to facilitate the idea into blossoming, but it's their idea. And so there is far less rejection to be overcame. And it's a beautiful thing because objections occur when somebody is feeling like, I'm not sure I agree with your idea. I'm not sure that I agree with your price. I'm not sure that I agree that this needs to be replaced or repaired. I'm not sure that I agree with you. I just don't trust you. Like, all these things are objections because something is coming full frontal on to that person's defenses, and they're putting up all the guards saying, hang on, this isn't computing, this isn't me, I haven't come up with this, this is you telling me that I have to do this. Just like when you tell a child that they have to go do something, like that child is naturally going to say no, right? But if they come up with the idea on their own, even if it's the exact same thing that you wanted them to do, it's now a different story. And that's effectively what you're doing. You're just slow playing this entire inception of replacement or really repair. It doesn't really matter, but it's their idea. And when they say, well, is there another option? That's them. Like, that's their own thought. And so it is naturally far more trustworthy because it's their own thought. And you have far less objections to overcome because they're the one that brought it up, not you. It's a brilliant approach.
Yeah, it's literally exact. I'm so glad you understand so quickly. A lot of people, and it's tough. Like when I try to train other people, of kind of what I do, it is a tough thing to train. But once you actually understand the concept behind it and actually what you're trying to achieve, and by building that bridge and what that bridge actually means and planting those seeds, like that is actually the most important parts of it. And that is your job. And then the rest will become very easy. Objection clearing. Like one with a water heater, was talking about water heaters when I was trying to learn how to move more tankless into the market, and I was like, well, tankless is endless hot water, right? So like you're trying to figure out what are the perks of this thing? Why is someone going to spend 3 times more, 4 times more on a tankless versus a tank? And so I did a lot of research, learning all this stuff, all the reasons why you would do it. And I started asking a question of like, oh, well, how often do you run out of hot water? Or how soon do you run out of hot water? And I realized that like 99% of people was like, oh, I never run out of hot water. And I realized that question was creating, in a sense, like it wasn't creating a path for me. Okay. It was a question you would think that you should ask for a tankless, but not enough consumers were buying tankless because of endless hot water, is what I realized by asking that and getting the response that, hey, oh no, we actually don't run out of hot water.
Right. There's no pain there.
Yeah. And you just created an objection later down the road of you're going to try to sell this tankless because it's endless hot water. Well, they don't care about that. They don't run out of hot water. So you have to figure out the why, why do they care about it? So, you will hear the same objections over and over and over about certain products. I've learned that is something that's different, is the objections are different. Okay. So the big thing I had to learn when I switched from plumbing to heating and cooling was the objections. And the reason I needed to learn that is because I need to learn how to clear those objections before they come up. And in order to do that, I just had to hear a lot of objections. I had to get in a lot of situations, and I had to kind of process it all and like take it all in, take a lot of notes, put people in boxes. I hate to say it, but we got little groups of people we're putting in boxes, and you're learning all of the objections that come up with certain problems and certain jobs and certain products. And then it's, well, how can I put into place in my process a statement, plant a seed, whatever, a story? How can I do something before they say that objection that I know that they're going to say? Because if I bring it up beforehand, and I clear that objection in whatever way I'm going to be able to, they no longer are able to bring it up as an objection later down the road when we're sitting at the table. So you're getting rid of so many objections that when we're at the table, like they just don't have many left. Like there just isn't. When you get into a position of a customer gives an objection and then you have an answer, and then they give an objection and then you have an answer, like that's like so salesy. It's like, I can fix everything. I can take care of all your problems. Like, we're the best. It just becomes too much. And people have been sold for many years. Like, people have seen all the different sales processes. They've seen all the tricky stuff out there. And it just doesn't work as well. So it's more about like figuring out the constant objections and then figuring out ways to clear those objections way earlier before they ever come up. And it'll basically clear them to where they're just gone. They're not there. And you have to get creative, but you can never clear too many objections. So that was a fun thing that I learned. Like, even if it's not an objection for that homeowner, by you making a statement and clearing a potential objection, it doesn't do any harm. Like it's never going to do any harm. And sometimes it'll actually clear an objection that they have in their head that they're not telling you.
Hmm.
And that's powerful because you'll start realizing they'll start opening up, they'll start relieving because you're clearing this stuff without them having to bring it up. So you're building confidence, you're building trust, and all of the stuff that they're worried, that balloon, we're deflating that balloon, all the stuff they told us at the beginning, we're bringing that stuff back out. This is when that stuff's important, and you can really start connecting stuff.
Yeah, Brian and I both have a friend. His name is Ed Staub, and he was a Sandler sales trainer for us for a number of years. And he would say that people love to buy, but they hate to be sold, right? And that concept is essentially what we're talking about here, where if you come at somebody and you're just like, oh yeah, well, I have an answer for that. Oh yeah, and I have an answer for that too, and for this, and for that. Hey, some people
You can only do it twice.
They're going to get to the end of that and they may still buy, but they're going to feel like they got sold, right? And so yours is a very subtle approach, even from the beginning of the call, even the very first thing that you talked about, that more submissive, more like, hey, just like get to know you, ask some questions, ask some more questions, kind of slowly enter into the call, allow them to engage more the whole way through and building that bridge, planting those seeds to the very end where you're actually at the table talking about, if you would decide to repair this type of thing, it's all a much more subtle approach. And the subtle approach for a lot of buyers today is going to be keeping them unawares that they are even in a purchasing mode, that they're slowly switching over into a buyer. And like they feel comfortable with it because they feel like they are naturally going there on their own fruition, rather than somebody say, all right, Adam, it's time for you to buy. So let me talk to you. Let's talk about hard numbers here. And that very just salesy types of stuff that nobody loves and everybody hates that. But when you become the buyer on your own, by your own decision, right? Number one, your defenses are all down because you think you're in control. And you are, because you, Adam, have set up the call to be that way. And number two, like, you are going to be far more likely to actually move forward with the purchase because you feel like this is the right thing to do. And it could even start entering into the pleasure field, which, replacing your water heater generally isn't pleasureful because of the expense. But if it's positioned properly and you talk about how the new one can do this and that and all these things that it can do for you and that you won't have to worry about anymore, it starts crossing over into the pleasure field, which can be an even more entertaining purchase experience.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So this is great stuff, Adam, and appreciate the approach that you're taking here. At the top of the show, we talked about how, you've been on both sides of plumbing and HVAC, and I asked you if you've experienced any difference with selling from a plumbing side or selling from an HVAC side. You said, no, it's pretty much all the same. And I want to kind of wrap up or bookend our show here with a different question. In your bio, it says that your average ticket is right around the $19,000 range, which is absolutely insane, man. Kudos to you. Congratulations. You're obviously doing something very well. But I assume based upon that average ticket that you're predominantly doing replacement sales. Is that correct?
So that average ticket, I will say, has obviously changed with HVAC. Okay. So HVAC's how, partially the reason that average ticket is the way it is compared to plumbing. Plumbing, I was more in the 5,000 range.
No, I totally understand that. The reason I'm asking is, in your HVAC world today, are you doing system replacements? Are you selling tech? Are you a repair tech that sometimes sells? What does that look like for you?
So yeah, it's only sells, no repairs involved within those numbers. Now, I would say one area where I've really improved, and like we talked at the beginning of the show, you can only run so many calls. Conversion can only really get so high. There is a limit on that. I've worked at, you kind of raise your conversion, but your average ticket comes down. And I can run at 80% conversion if I want, but my average ticket's gonna not be there, and it's this balance, of where you want to be. So my goal is always to be at 60% conversion. Like that's where I don't really want to be higher than that. I don't want to be lower than that. And then I want my average ticket to be, that's what I want to climb and what I want to grow. And I would say the big thing is not doing single system replacements. A lot of people in the HVAC sales, they struggle with their average ticket. Mostly, in my opinion, add-ons are a big thing, and we can talk about that as far as, adding water heaters or adding stuff to the ticket. But also, like, how do we build a bridge that it makes sense in January when there's a foot of snow on the ground and I have a furnace that's old and acting up? Why does it make sense to replace my air conditioner at that same time? So a lot of people are, just selling a furnace, and it's, half of that average ticket. So that really hurts our average ticket. And that was something that I really had to work on, is like, why does this make sense to replace all of this at one time? And that's kind of a big part of growing that average ticket.
The reason I asked you that, Adam, is because I was curious whether your sales approach, now that you're more focused on replacement, from the earlier days where you were actually talking about fixes and repairs and those types of things, have you noticed any significant difference in how you approach the client now that you're more on the replacement? Like, you're already there. Perhaps the client even is already there. Like, has your perspective or has your process changed at all in that shift from, hey, let's talk about repairs, to, hey, let's talk about replacement?
So that's kind of more on the process side of things. I would say that's a little different with HVAC, is that we really do a lot of business through our membership. So through doing tune-ups on the system, not a lot of demand calls right now, as far as not just in, because of the time of the year, but eco, as far as HVAC, that's a big difference. I guess plumbing is all demand. It's people are calling you because they have a problem. All right. Whether it's a leak or it's not working, whatever, they're calling you because they have a problem. HVAC, we've learned it, eco, as we've opened up HVAC, is we don't get a lot of demand calls for HVAC. So I guess one thing I would want to say is that our process in HVAC is that a service tech is going to go first every time, unless a homeowner is saying, hey, I want a new system, I want an estimate for a new system. So a service tech is going to go there originally, and they're going to diagnose the system. They're going to go through and do the full maintenance, and they're going to offer any repair options. And what I'm training with them is we don't even bring up like, hey, you should replace this. It's, we go through the maintenance. These are the parts that are wearing out. These are what it would cost to repair these parts and pieces. And then, I'm actually training them to get the consumer to then ask that important question to them of what's a new one cost. And that's what I've been working a lot with the technicians. And then that's when they're going to set up that lead for me of, hey, I can get someone out here. They're going to come out, give you some information, go over everything with you. Now, when I get there, this might be a difference between me and some of the other people in our group, is I pull back the replacement again. I start pulling that back away, and I'll dive back into the repair. So I'll have all of the repair estimates right there on the iPad for their system. So I know what they are looking at repairing, and I'll kind of question why we're not doing that. How come we're not just repairing this thing? I'll go right back into repairing it, because I want them to open up to me about, once again, about replacing, and then bringing that idea up again. The more I can get them to bring that up is really the better. We'll do team visits where, off season, we're just going on maintenance calls, and I'll just go with a maintenance tech, and it's just still providing all the repair options and then bringing up replacements. So yeah, to answer your question, my average ticket don't have any repairs involved, but I'm still talking about the repairs.
Sure.
It's just the service tech. If they don't replace, the service tech will get the credit for the repair, and he'll do the repair.
If you take that approach, Adam, I bet you have one of the lowest cancellation rates on your entire team.
Oh, I do. Yeah, that's the other thing. The side of it is, like, you'll have some people that'll make little spurts and like jump up in sales for a few weeks, but then you'll see all these cancellations. It's just, they try too hard. You're trying to convince people. It's the whole process. I don't get cancellations. I don't get bad reviews. Those are the two things that get squashed with all of this. You might not sell everything, but you're not going to get those two things.
So you had said, I think it was before we started the episode, that you were doing 3.5 to 3.8 million a year in your plumbing truck without excavations. without sewer lines before you moved over to HVAC, and that you're carrying a $5,000 opportunity average. What were you selling?
Water heaters, tankless. But that's the thing. So I started to focus in on going to water heater opportunities. And from there, for a little while, I would run 3 water heaters a day. And basically, it could be a water heater maintenance. It could be, hearing a noise with my water heater. It could be a water heater estimate. But I started running just water heater calls. Now, don't get me wrong, you don't get an average ticket of $5,000 by just selling a water tank every time, or even majority of it, or even half of the time. So it's that was the type of calls I ran. A lot of sump pump calls. I got into doing a lot of that. So a lot of sump pumps, a lot of water heater calls, and then even like drain repairs and stuff. Like we could talk for hours about the pipe, and how we talk about. So when I didn't do any sewer sales, but I got into doing roof drainage from sump pumps and sump pump drainage. And, your sump pump leads into your drainage tile going out in the yard. Well, the type of pipe that they use for that, that's the problem. And we can talk about that, but that leads right into that. So a sump pump turns into replacing the drain pipe out to the street for the sump pump. Or, a water heater. Like I was moving 25 tankless a month, on water heater calls. So now you think about that, you're running water heater calls. There's 25 tankless that that was kind of my number, was about 25 a month. If I was hitting on all cylinders, really like 1 or 2 a day out of 3 water heater calls. But all of it was from not trying to sell a tankless water heater. And that was the fun part about it, is you just, I'd make a comment be looking at the water heater and we talk about new ones and be like, it really just depends on what you want. They even have them fancy things that hang on the wall. And then I wouldn't say anything about it. And I'd go all the way to the table and I'd present just water tanks. And darn it, they'd ask all the time, what's that thing he's talking about that hangs on the wall? Is that one of the tankless? I think I heard about that. How come, what about that? Well, you didn't tell me that's what you wanted. Is that something you're interested in? We'll start this all over, and we just start over, and you're not selling a tankless water. You go in there and try to sell a tankless water heater, they're not buying it. You're trying to sell them something that's 3 times more expensive, and you're trying to convince them that they need to do it. And they do not need to do it. It's truly a choice. And they got to come up with that on their own. And it's the same stuff. It's the same theories, like I talk.
So I would say even at a tankless water heater a day, we're still not running 3 calls. We're still not at a $5,000 opportunity average.
Well, I mean, our tankless are $7,000.
Okay. So
I don't know.
We're getting there.
Tankless average.
So was there water treatment, or did you do a lot of water treatment? Is there the opportunity for that in Ohio? I don't know what the...
Yep. So a lot of water treatment would get included within that. So there was plenty of tickets that turned into $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 tickets because, you'd get into a $7,000 tankless and it's like, well, do you have water filtration? And it's like, oh, do I need it? I don't know. Do you? It's just a simple question.
The client's like, Adam, you're no help, bro. Look, guys, you're going to have to sell me here if we're doing any work here today.
You'll be amazed how the cards change. The cards do flip. So it's, and you'll turn it into it. Now all of a sudden it's a tankless and a water treatment. And, we might as well toss in a sump pump just because it's original when the home was built 20 years ago, you can turn a plumbing ticket into a really nice ticket, but you got to be consistent. That's where that average ticket comes from, is being consistent every day, looking for all of the stuff. I can't tell you how many, the fun stuff. You got to have fun with it. The clean outs, you could trip over a clean out, clean out sticking up out of the concrete or something in a basement floor. You're just walking by that thing to go look at that water heater that's leaking. You better find that thing and trip over it. Who would put that there? Why didn't they put that level with the concrete? That don't make no sense. And you don't say nothing about it. And people bring it up. They'll ask you, what was it supposed to? Back to that thing you tripped over earlier. I know I just bought a tankless water heater, but where you hit your head on a pipe, I'm a short dude, but if there's any low-hanging pipes, man, where did that come from? Why did they do that? That don't make no sense. And you don't react on this stuff. You don't try to sell them on these things at that moment. When we start talking about a water heater or this or that, like, it's so important not to jump and try to sell them in that moment. Like, we're going to get to that. They're going to ask the questions that they need to ask. And that's when we're going to open up. That's when we're going to be a nerd. When they ask me about a tankless, well, now they're going to see that I'm going to take over. They're going to see that I'm no longer submissive. They're going to see that I'm no longer they're going to see a much different smile. You're going to get excited. This is where you can be a nerd a little bit and you can geek out a little bit and like really dive in for just a few minutes and let them see that excitement and you getting excited about them talking about a tankless water heater and that you get to potentially do that for them. It changes the game and you're no longer trying to convince them to buy a tankless water heater.
So let's just take 5 and do what we do, right? It's been a minute anyway. And let's say Nate fell for that thing you said hanging on the wall.
What
thing.
do you
what was
mean
that about?
Fell for it, Brian?
And
it's masterfully constructed. There's no falling for it.
Let's do a little bit of role play where Nate just kind of brings it up toward the end and says, that thing you were saying, the fancy thing on the wall, like, all right, and just take it from there, Nate. And let's walk through that.
Okay, so hey, I appreciate you sharing like these different options with me here, Adam. And obviously we need to choose something to do today because you're telling me the water heater is done. Like earlier today, you had mentioned something about like they have some, I don't know. I think you said it was like a fancy thing that hangs on the wall. Is that listed in one of these packages or is that something else?
Well, first, Nate, I want to be clear. We can definitely repair that water heater. So I want to make sure you understand we can definitely repair that today if you want to get that fixed.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. When it comes to replacement, there are a lot of options. Now, you have a standard water tank. So that's what, we gave you options to replace your water tank because that's what you have. But, in the world of technology, there's a lot of differences. And, if you would are you interested in something like that hangs on the wall? Like, have you ever heard of that?
Well, I mean, I've heard the term before, like when different types of things, but I'm not very familiar with it. I guess I was just like, are you not bringing it up because it wouldn't work in my home, or what were you thinking?
Well, it's more of just your home has this style of a system. Okay, it's built for this style of a system. There's a lot of retrofitting, a lot of changing, but you can go to completely different style systems. That's a much bigger project. And, not everybody's interested in that. Not everybody wants to retrofit all of their plumbing and redo all of that in a time like this. You don't have any hot water. I just want to make sure that there's a quick, easy fix here. But also, if we want to take a step back and we want to review like some of these other things that are technology wise that are in the market, I would be happy to do that with you if that's something you want to look at.
Well, like what's kind of like the big thing about it? I mean, why do people even look at something like that?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. People buy them for different reasons. So, some people will buy them because of the longevity of them, of how long they last. They last.
Is it longer than the kind that I have?
Yeah, typically about 2 times as long. I mean, you might get
Oh, wow.
10 or 15 years out of a water tank and maybe 20 out of a tankless if you take good care of them.
Well, okay.
So, like you definitely get a much longer life expectancy out of them. I don't know, like, another reason is the energy savings. It is much more energy efficient. An old water tank, think about it, like the technologies from like forever ago. We have a big old steel tank and then a burner underneath of it. And we're just heating all this water all the time.
It's like a big
It
tea
doesn't make
kettle.
any, sometimes it doesn't make sense, but like, I don't ever want to like push something on you. A tankless that's totally different. It's totally different. So like, if that's something you're interested in, we could definitely look at that. But that is something that's totally different.
Well, you had said that it would take a lot of retrofitting. Is that even an option in my house?
Well, that's normally the first thing is once someone's interested in potentially doing that is I'm going to qualify their home because about 50% of homes are not able to put in a tankless.
Yeah.
So the first thing I would do is I would take a look around now that I know that that's something you would potentially be interested in. And I would just first qualify to see if it's possible.
Okay. Well, I mean, you said it's like twice the life, that probably means it's like twice the price, right?
Oh yeah, they're definitely expensive.
Huh. Well, okay. I mean, how long would it take you to kind of add that as another option here?
So if you could just give me maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes in the basement. I'm also going to step outside. I want to look at a couple things out there, and then I can let you know if it's something you qualify for or not.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I got some time.
We do that, and then congratulations, dude. Like, you could do it if you wanted to. Like, not every home can. So, like, it is possible. After I looked at everything, it's definitely possible. It's just not everybody wants to, but you have the opportunity. What else would you like to know about it?
I'd like to know how to get it in my house, my man. That is great.
Yeah, congratulations. Love that part.
Well done.
I'll tell you, man, it felt as I was just sitting here trying to probably more or less act like I was listening to a technician talk to a homeowner on a Rilla recording, which is something I do often now. What I was hearing from Adam did not feel like I was hearing a salesperson talk to a prospect. I felt like I was hearing a legitimate plumber talk to someone who owns a plumbing system, an advisor, if you will, which is kind of what the category we want to fall into with the client. He seemed to have no vested interest whatsoever in this tankless getting done. And that soft pull approach as opposed to push, it made it feel like Nate gives rigid pushback. I don't know how many episodes of Waste No Day you've listened to or if you've heard us role play before, but Nate tends to give very hard pushback, engineer level pushback, the kind that everybody can't stand. And he would do it here, absolutely do it, because he just goes off of what he feels like he would do in the situation if he were actually in it. And to me, he felt like he was being gently pulled in the direction he wanted to go in anyway. And the lack of aggression on your side made him come after it a few times.
And then when you have, you get to the next step of like even being able to pull it back away a little bit, you start having fun with that. We'll talk at some point, but like creating separation with purpose after you've provided enough information to make a buying decision. That's like a massive thing I've learned. And it's something that kind of right at the end where you kind of take all of the pressure away and you kind of pull the whole project back away from them one last time. And you give them a moment, and we can talk about that at a time when we have more. But
well, do it real quick. Take it away from them a little bit.
Okay, so we're at the table. We're going over options. We've now opened up the idea of tankless. Okay, I've deleted all the water tank options. All right, all that work I did, I'm going to delete all of that with purpose. And if I have to rebuild the water heaters, I will. But like, we're going to look at all these tankless options now, and we're looking at it, and we're sitting there at the table, and we're going over the options, and you get to the point of the presentation where you have to stop talking, and you're turning the cards over. You've said everything you're going to say about the options. It's the turnover moment when basically you're going to turn this information over, and you're just going to be quiet and you're going to allow them to speak next, right? So in that moment, the consumer, they're going to do a couple different things. They're either going to engage in an option. They're going to ask you a question about one of the options. All right, that's great. That's just go down that path with them. Okay, that's kind of what you want in a sense. All right, if they start asking you a question about a certain option, all right, now we're narrowing it down, and that's great. But that don't always happen. Like a lot of times you get to that moment, it's silent, and they're like, can you email me this? Or, will you send me this over in an email? It's not a question about one of the actual options, it's the end. They're basically like, will you email me this over? And I hated getting that. And then it was, well, that was an objection I wasn't able to clear ahead of time. And that was the only objection I was getting, was I was clearing all of these objections, but right at the end, they'd be like, can you email me that? Like, well, it's like, well, how do I clear that? Well, you tell them earlier, hey, I'm going to email this to you when I'm all done. I'm sick of you telling me that. So I'm going to clear that objection too. And I'm going to tell you that earlier in the call when we first sit down, when we're all done here today, I'm going to email you all of this information. That way, so you can't tell me that as a statement. So when I go into this silent mode, I know that you're going to either ask me a question about an option, you're going to and that'll lead to picking an option, or you're going to tell me to email it or ask me if I can email it. So one of those two are going to basically happen in that moment. And so what I've started doing, and I've done this for a long time now, it's fun. This is the only opportunity you're allowed to interrupt somebody, is what I say. So when they start to respond after you're quiet, if they're not asking a question, okay, about an option, if they're responding in any other way than asking a question about one of the options, Mrs. Jones, I'm so sorry. I just noticed that the pictures didn't save that I took down there. I need to go down and take some pictures. I need to get all of these put in the data here before I leave. And you just get up and leave and go down to the basement. You don't say anything. You don't do anything. You're doing it with purpose, okay? So they start to say, like, oh, is there any way you can email? And that's when I'm going to interrupt. And I'm going to say, oh, darn it, I just realized. And like, I'm interrupting them on purpose. All right. I don't want them to finish that statement. Okay. I interrupt, but not like, hey, take a few minutes. This is what people will typically do is like, oh, take some time and talk to your wife about it. I'm going to step outside. Well, that's so awkward and creates so much pressure and so much like, you know, pressure to make a decision, right? Instead, when you do it for your own need, like I forgot these pictures or these pictures didn't save, I need to go do this. I have a reason I need to leave the table at this time. And you'll leave, and you go down to the basement and you'll take your pictures. You would be shocked how many consumers will come to the basement, or when you come to the top of the stairs, they have an answer for you, and it's normally a good one. And a lot of times you'll hear, like when you go down to the basement, like especially, I do this all the time, but especially when there's one person, like a wife by herself or a husband by himself, you'll notice that a lot of times if there's someone else they want to talk to, you'll hear that they're instantly on the phone. When you go down to the basement, they're instantly on the phone talking to so and so. Just give them a few minutes, and I tell them, just give me about 10 minutes downstairs, and I say that on purpose that way so they know they have 10 or 15 minutes to do whatever. And you're not telling them to think about it. You're not telling them to make a decision or to talk to anybody, but they will. And it takes a lot of pressure away. And a lot of times it's a great way to gather some people that was going to tell you to email them the quote, and that they want to think about it, but really they just needed to talk to someone for a moment. They just needed to make one call, but they felt awkward doing that. They just wanted to check with their father or their brother, and a lot of times once they just make that little check-in, then they're ready to go. At that point, like, you can start taking it away in so many ways. I'll start bringing back up the repair, and another option is we could just repair this thing and like just bring that right back on the table. And then they'll quickly tell you, no, I've already decided I want to replace it. We're going to replace it. Well, what else do you need from me? Cause I am really busy. I don't want to rush anything, but like, if there's anything else you need from me, I'm here. But if not, I do need to get going to the next call. In a weird way, I've already been there an hour and a half. Like, I'm good. Like, I've already involved them. I've taken my time and everything. But at a certain point, my time is very valuable, and I want them to feel that. And I want them to realize that, like, hey, this guy is important. I never want that consumer to think that, like, we're not busy or we're just, staying there until they say yes. A lot of times this happens. It's funny. Probably once a week, I'll leave a house and I'll make bets with people about like how quick they're going to call in and schedule. And a lot of times it's within an hour. And it's funny when that happens. And it's because you can tell that they wanted to say yes, but I pulled it away so much that I actually did pull it away. And then they'll call the office and then they'll sign up for the job. And it's
And
fun.
they come back.
Like it takes a lot of confidence to do it. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to think you're going to lose some calls doing it, but it's amazing of how many people will chase you. They will. And that's society's changing, how we buy. We don't like to be sold. Like you said, we like to buy stuff. We don't like to be sold. And society's changing in a lot of ways in that way. And people like to chase. They like to do things other people are doing. They like to buy stuff because other people are buying it. I tell a lot of stories. I talk about Mrs. Jones down the street a lot. This is what's most popular. Like, a lot of consumers do this. It's never, this is what I would do. It's, most people do this. This seems to be really popular, and really lean in. I believe sales is going to change over the next few years, and it's going to be you're really going to lean more on some of that stuff as time goes on, and you have your younger generations buying homes. They're not used to being sold the same way that some of the people were, back in the day. And I think there's going to be a big change on how you have to have these conversations to be able to sell, the newer generation people.
Appreciate that. I think you're absolutely right. I think it changed massively around the 2020 mark, where I saw the old tactics and tricks of the trade of selling, where you were just kind of pigeonholing people into a buy, into a yes. That just kind of faded away, and everything oddly became much more empathetic and much more relationship based. I mean, it always was on the highest levels, but it seemed to go really quickly into a place where the people who weren't able to do that just stopped selling. Like, they stopped being able to sell. And I think it's a good thing for all of the sales industries. Before we let you go, I had two quick questions. Number one in particular, because you're not, how old are you?
33.
You're not that old of a guy, and you've done a lot in two industries already. If you could jump back to the year before you made any kind of waves in a plumbing truck, when you were just average or maybe slightly below average as a selling tech, what is the biggest piece of advice you would give yourself right there to help you get to where you're at now, maybe a little faster?
Oh man, that's a great question. How you show up is extremely important. Your relationships, your personal life, where you are as a man, as a woman, is so important. And even though I kind of figured out this process in a sense of selling and not selling, I don't feel that I'm a salesperson. I don't feel that I'm selling people. It's more of educating, building this bridge, allowing them to bring this stuff up. Even doing all of that, when you're having problems, personal problems, it's going to show through. Even though how great I was at plumbing and all of this stuff, like, I went through a lot of difficult things in my life. And even throughout some of my sales career of dealing, with breakups and kids, different things, people, life happens, right? And you still got to show up every day. And as a salesperson and as a technician, we show up, and doing the actual work is what's required of us. That's the minimum. But our attitude isn't actually required, in a sense, and how that consumer feels when we show up. And I noticed that, that stuff affects you. It does. It really does. And if I could have told myself anything, it would be that you have to realize that you're putting on a show. Okay. It's showtime. And, I started thinking of performers and how can I perform even though I'm going through all of this, really hard stuff? And how can I still show up for my team, for my installers, for my kids? How can I show up to make that different? And, what you end up realizing is that how you show up really affects the direction of these calls, and it affects everybody. And you just have to put on a show. An artist, when they go sing a song, they've sing that song hundreds and thousands of times, but they could do it without the emotion, without jumping around the stage, but they have to put on that show every single time, that exact same show over and over, but they have to do it with such excitement and such attitude, right? And I would say that that's probably the most important thing, is realizing that you have to lock in, you have to focus, and you have to realize that it's showtime. I always say, like, it's showtime. It doesn't matter what's going on. It doesn't matter. Like, when I shut that door of the truck and start walking to a front door, like, it's showtime. And you're putting on a show. When you see that leaking water heater, we've seen it 100 times. We know we don't have any emotion to it. And when you don't have emotion to it, neither does the customer at that point. But when we make those little remarks and we actually care, and it's coming from a real spot, it's a shame that you have water all over your floor, and you're expressing that, and you're allowing them to feel that. The tone in your voice from the beginning of the call and throughout, I always say, you start off real low and you work up and you get excited, and you're building this, but the tone is so important. And a lot of the tone comes from your home life. A lot of times is what I realized, like where you are emotionally, where you are in that moment, in that day, in that year, that tone comes off in a way that sometimes you don't even realize. And the things you tell yourself, oh, I'm going to work and I'm going to ignore this stuff at home. But your tone doesn't always know that. And, you start seeing numbers drop off. And a big moment for me was when I started realizing that I changed my tone and then my numbers came back. And I started realizing it wasn't always about what I was saying. I was still saying the same stuff. I was still doing all of this same stuff, but I wasn't doing it with the same tone and the same enthusiasm and the same grit and grind, and it was just coming off from a more stale spot that I've done this over and over and I'm just going to ride through this and get through this call. And if I would have learned that a long time ago, I feel that I would have really I would have been able to deal with those waves and those hard times a lot easier.
That makes perfect sense, buddy. And I appreciate that as somebody who's been through, 12 more years of exactly that. And really didn't really realize till the end of my career in a truck how much the outside affected the inside of the call and my tonality and behavior. And, I train a lot of techs in their early 20s. And oftentimes, be it guys on my team or people that I deal with online, there's always I never want to get caught saying it's the calls and it's the clients, but really I know it is, where you can physically see a difference in these people from now to last week or from currently to last month. Physically see a difference.
Yeah.
Where it's clear that everything's not going well outside of here. So it's like, I wish I had known more of this when I was younger, that this was this big of a deal, how the home life was going, how my energy was because I was or wasn't sleeping enough, how your diet actually affects how enthusiastic you are, how the amount of sleep you get. So yeah, great point. And I know you don't get to go back and tell 21-year-old Adam, but you're still doing all right, buddy. Good job.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Last question. This one came up. One of the audience members asked Nate and me this question when we did an audience Q&A a few episodes back, and we decided we're going to start asking our guests this question. So if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
I'd be a chef.
Really?
Quick answer. Okay.
Sounds like you have plans.
No, I love cooking. I feel like it maybe would have been difficult to get to the level I am as a chef. And I don't like to work evenings, so it's not the life I
there
wanted.
Goes that
but,
idea.
I do love I love cooking. I love everything about being a chef. I love a lot of that. Like I said, probably not what I necessarily would. It would be a hobby, but it would be something I would really enjoy doing and making a living doing it. That's for sure.
Love it. This has been exceptional, Adam, and really appreciated your soft approach, but very effective. I think our listeners are going to take a lot away from this one and insert some of these real applicable things into their presentation right away. As we wrap things up, if people are interested in learning more about you or even about Eco, or they would just like to reach out and talk to you a little bit, or if you're open to that, where's a great place to find you?
Yeah, so you can reach me at adam@geteco.com. That's my email there. I am on LinkedIn. I don't have social media, but other than LinkedIn, you can kind of contact me there or my email there.
Fantastic. And as we bring it in for Landon here, Adam, which college football team do you happen to cheer for these days?
The Buckeyes.
Why would you even bring that in? Why?
I knew it was coming. Sorry, he has a little bit on us.
Man. At least bring that up in late 2025 when he's not owing the last 4 to the Wolverines. I mean, the good news
Adam, we
is
have appreciated.
Nate is a Penn State fan, and you guys are doing really well on that front.
Yeah.
Little lion that cried.
Anyways, Adam, we've appreciated you being on the show, man. Thanks so much for sharing some time with us and all these great concepts.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Appreciate you, brother.
Have a good night.
Well, that's a wrap for this episode. We hope that you enjoyed your time with Adam. It was a great demonstration of the power of a takeaway and the power of a process combined into one there. And he really did an exceptional job of entering into some, I think, new territory and exciting new ways of approaching the call. And really the strength that he has developed over time of having the person choose to buy rather than have them be sold by you. And I think that's such an effective way to communicate as well as to gain a very loyal client base that is going to be requesting you again and again. There was a lot of tidbits in this one, and it was a longer episode. So really encourage you to go back and listen to this one a second time to pick up on all the good things Adam was talking about. If you loved his show, hit him up on his LinkedIn or his email and share this one around, because I'm sure there's some other people out there that would love to hear what's working for Adam, especially, he's combined the plumbing and HVAC trades into one in this one singular moment. They've been unified into perfect harmony. So it's a great episode and we enjoyed it. Let us know what you thought about it. Find us in the Waste No Day Facebook group or leave us a review. We'd sure love that too. We'll leave you now with our weekly challenge, which continues to be the same: to choose to wake up each and every morning and waste no day.